Today we'll start it from page number 2. I tried to sound swear. Swear here means harsh. I was becoming harsh now. Now I really mean this. Mr. Harriot says that now I am saying this, and this is the reality. You have to believe that if you do not cut the food right now, cut his food means if you will not shorten his food, कि अब अगर तुम इसका food, इसका खाना कम नहीं करोगी and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. And if you will not give him exercise, then he will really fall ill, right? तो ये देखो, ये पिक्चर जो दिख रही है इसमें क्या है, डॉग की शेप देखो, कितना एक स्फीयर सा सिलेंड्रिकल शेप बनी हुई है और ऐसा लगता है जैसे कि सिलेंडर को 4 पाइप्स लगी हुई हैं. द लेग्स आर सो थिन. So now this time that Mr. Harriot becomes strict and gives the instruction to Mrs. Pumphrey to take care of the dog, to give him less amount of food and more exercise. You must harden your heart. And moreover, he says to Mrs. Pumphrey that if you care for your dog, then you must need to be hardened. Your heart need to be hardened, कि तुम्हें अपना दिल सख्त करना पड़ेगा. And keep him on a very strict diet. And you need to give him a strict diet also. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. रंग होता है निचोड़ना. So she twisted her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Harriot. And she says that, oh, Mr. Harriot, I will surely do this. I am sure you are right. And then she says to Mr. Harriot that you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult, but it is very difficult for me. It will be difficult for me to give him less amount of food when he needs more. But you are also right. As far as his health is concerned, I need to give him less food and more exercise. She set off head down. She set off means she went from there with head down along the road, as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. As if she was determined to put the new worry into practice immediately, because now she was very much determined to do the practice of the same immediately. मतलब किस चीज की प्रैक्टिस करनी थी, उसको कम खाना देने की और ज्यादा एक्सरसाइज की प्रैक्टिस तभी से स्टार्ट कर देनी थी. The expected call. I watched their progress with growing concern, and I watched their progress. उनमें जो progress हुई, that was seen by me with growing concern. Means I watched the progress of the dog. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. Tottering means walking weakly. Now Tricky is the dog and Tricky was moving. He was walking weakly along in his tweed coat. Tweed is the in his woolen coat. He was moving. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats. Tricky had an almirah full of such type of coats for the cold weather. and he used to wear the coats in cold weather and a raincoat for wet days. Moreover, there was a coat for Tricky also, which was meant to be worn by Tricky in wet days, means during rainy time. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. He struggled on. His struggle was regular, drooping in his harness. Drooping means he was falling down sometimes when he was doing the work. मतलब ये जो काम था एक्सरसाइज करते कई बार वो गिर भी जाता था. I thought it would be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. And then Mr. Heriot thought that it would be long before he had heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. The expected call came within a few days. And within a few days, Mrs. Pumphrey called Mr. Heriot. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Distraught means worried. Mrs. Pumphrey was worried. Tricky would eat nothing. Tricky would not eat anything, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, even he has refused those dishes also which were at some time his all-time favorite, and he had bouts of vomiting. Bouts of vomiting means he has the attacks of vomiting, means sometimes he vomits by seeing the food, कि कई बार उसको खाना दिखाई देते ही उसको vomit आ जाती है. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting, and he most of the time he spends by lying down on the rug. What rug is the torn type of cloth. फटा हुआ जो कपड़ा होता है, कहती ज्यादातर वो उस पे ही लेटा रहता है. Panting means breathing heavily. He breathes heavily. He takes deep breaths and didn't want to go for walks. Moreover, he doesn't go for walk, didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance, and Mr. Heriot's plans were already ready. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. And the only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period, and the only solution was to take Tricky out of the house for some time. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. Then he suggested that he needs to be kept in hospital under observations for 14 days. The poor lady almost swooned. Swoon होता है to become unconscious, बेहोश सा हो जाना. And Mrs. Pumphrey was now becoming unconscious when she heard that Tricky needs to be hospitalized. She was sure he would pine and die if he didn't see her every day. Pine means yearn, इच्छा होना, keep desire. Mrs. Pumphrey thinks that he was sure he would be keeping desire, means it would be the desire of the dog to meet Mrs. Pumphrey daily and die if he didn't see her every day. And Mrs. Pumphrey was thinking that Tricky will die if he will not see Mrs. Pumphrey daily. But I took a firm line. But he took firm decision. Tricky was very ill and this was the only way to save him. But Tricky was very ill and This was the only way to save his life, to hospitalize him. To keep him under observation was the only way to save his life. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay. And in fact, he thought that it was best to take him without being late, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's railings. And when he took the dog with him, Mrs. Pumphrey followed him and he was weeping. I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. Then he came out of the car, took the little dog with him who was wrapped in the blanket. जो dog है ट्रिकी है उसको ब्लैंकेट में लपेट के हैरियट उसे बाहर ले आया एंड मिसेस पम्फ्री वॉज वीपिंग बिहाइंड वो पीछे रो रही थी. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, breakfast ball, lunch ball, supper ball. So the entire staff was roused. Roused is awakened. The entire staff was now awakened, and means the entire staff there were maids. Maids were rushing in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, breakfast ball, lunch ball, supper ball. Means everyone was doing its duty, realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff. I started to drive away. And as it was clear that my car will not hold all the things in it, so I started to drive. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of little coats through the window. अब सामान उसका मतलब जो भी सामान जिसके साथ ट्रिकी खेलता था, जैसे उसका दिन का बेड, उसका रात का बेड, उसके टॉयज थे, उसके कुशन्स थे, ब्रेकफास्ट बॉल, लंच बॉल, सपर बॉल, जो भी था उसका, वो सब कुछ मिस्टर हैरियट के पास लाया गया. लेकिन ये पता था कि मिस्टर हैरियट की गाड़ी में इतना कुछ नहीं आएगा, सो ही ड्रोव अवे, वो चला गया. एंड then he went, Mrs. Pumphrey with despairing cry, Mrs. Pumphrey with hopeless cry. She was crying hopelessly as the dog had gone. She threw an armful of little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Then he looked from the mirror the activities of Mrs. Pumphrey. Everybody was in tears. Everyone was crying as Tricky had gone. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. And when they joined the main road, he saw the pathetic condition, the pitiable condition of the animal who was taking deep breaths. I patted the head. Patted क्या होता है? प्यार से सहलाना. So I patted the head of Tricky, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. Wag means move. And when I patted the head of Tricky, then Tricky made a strong effort to move its tail. Poor old lad, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. Poor old lad, poor old, now he says him a boy. I said, you haven't a kick in you. that you are not having the power of a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. कि अभी तक तो तुम इतने weak हो that you are not having enough power to kick something, but I know how to cure you. At the surgery, the household dogs. बेटे यहाँ तक रीडिंग के बाद ये जो क्वेश्चंस हैं वो आपने करने हैं. इज द नरेटर एज रिच एज ट्रिकीज मिस्ट्रेस? क्या नरेटर उतना रिच है जितने ट्रिकी के मिस्ट्रेस? हाउ डज ही ट्रीट द डॉग? वो डॉग को कैसे ट्रीट करता है? वाई इज ही टेम्प्टेड टू कीप ट्रिकी एज ऑन परमानेंट Tricky on as a permanent guest? Why does he want to keep Tricky his permanent guest? And why does Mrs. Pumphrey think the dog's recovery is a triumph of surgery? So, let us continue. At the surgery, the household dogs surged round me. At the surgery, the household dogs surged round me. Surged means came around me. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with his dull eyes, and when put down, and when I kept him down, he lay motionless on the carpet. The other dogs, after sniffing round him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. And the other dogs who were there, they, after sniffing round him, they, after smelling Tricky for few seconds, decided that he was an uninteresting object. They decided that Tricky was not an interesting object and ignored him. I made up a bed for him in warm, loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. Then he made a warm, loose bed for Tricky. For 2 days I kept an eye on him, and for 2 days I was fully attentive towards Tricky, giving him no food but plenty of water. I was not giving him much food, but I was giving him water only. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings. And after the surgery, after two days after the surgery, now Tricky was showing some interest in his surroundings also. And on the third, he began to whimper when he heard the dogs in the yard. And on the third day, he was giving others. Whimper means to give sounds. जो dogs भौंकने से पहले थोड़ी थोड़ी साउंड निकालते हैं, that is called whimper. So on third day, he started giving some sounds when he heard the other dogs in the yard. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out. Trotted out means walked out briskly. And when when Mr. Harriot opened the door, Tricky came out and was immediately engulfed by Joe. Engulfed means engaged by Joe, the greyhound, and his friends. Greyhound is the kind of dog. एक breed होती है dog की जो greyhounds होते हैं. तो बाहर आने के बाद क्या हुआ, वो उसको जो मिला, ग्रेहाउंड मिला और बाकी के फ्रेंड्स. After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moved off down the garden. And after thoroughly inspecting him, जो डॉग्स उसके पास आए उन्होंने अच्छी तरह से ट्रिकी को इंस्पेक्ट किया, चेक किया, and then they moved off down the garden. Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with his surplus fat. ट्रिकी उनके पीछे पीछे जा रहा था, लेकिन वो थोड़ा थोड़ा घूम भी रहा था with the surplus fat he had on his body. Extra fat. Surplus is extra fat. Actually उसकी बॉडी में जो प्रॉब्लम हुई थी उसका मेन रीजन क्या था? जो फैट था उसकी बॉडी पे. Later that day, I was present at feeding time. I watched while Tristan slopped the food into the bowls. Later that day, I was present at the feeding time and I saw while Tristan sloped the food. Slope means spread the food into the balls. There was the usual headlong rush. Headlong means straight rush followed by the sounds of high speed eating. There was the rush and the dogs were making the sounds when they were eating the food. Every dog knew that if he fell behind the others, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of his meal. और वहाँ पे जितने भी dogs थे, all of them knew one thing, that if he fell behind the others, then he would be said liable to have some competition for the last part of the meal. When they had finished, Tricky took a walk round the shining balls, licking casually inside one or two of them. जब सब dogs ने finish कर दिया खाना, then Tricky took a walk round. Then Tricky took a walk. He took a round near the shining balls and licking casually inside one or two of them, and he licked inside the ball. Next day, an extra bowl was put for him, and on the next day, one more ball was kept that was for Tricky, and I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it, and Mr. Heriot was surprised when he saw that Tricky was also jostling, means pulling and pushing others to make his way to reach near his ball. So it's all for today, students. Tomorrow we'll start from here. राइट तो आपने चैप्टर की रीडिंग करनी है और ये जो इसमें क्वेश्चंस आए हैं दीज 4 क्वेश्चंस यू विल राइट द आंसर्स ऑफ दीज क्वेश्चंस इन योर रफ नोटबुक राइट ओके बाय स्टूडेंट्स